I help small businesses figure out where north is. Growth is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, what you're doing is working. On the other hand, cracks become chasms. Are you valuing yourself as others see you, or are you valuing yourself as you see you? Typically, the gap between the person in the role and the next most competent is too big.
Hello and welcome to the Success Differently podcast. My name is Michelle Sorgaroli. I am your host today, and we are being joined by Fraser Engel. Now, Fraser is the founder of MindWorks Consulting. This is a company that focuses on fractional, strategic, and HR consulting. They focus on people, performance, and potential. He's a coach and consultant to leaders in the nonprofit and business area. And Fraser is a proud baseball, hockey, and golf dad who's married to an amazing woman and experiences joy every day at work, as alluded to in a recent testimonial that reads, he's a skilled facilitator who is a joy to work with and releases tension with wit and humor. We're in for a delightful conversation today. Thank you for joining us, Fraser.
Hey, Michelle, thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this conversation. Now, people, performance, and potential. What's that all about? Give us a little summary on what those mean to you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually haven't thought about that in a while. That
Nice.
idea MindWorks has been around since 2000. And so we're getting close, another month to my 25th anniversary. And I thought when I was coming up with my kind of tagline, I thought
Mm,
about how do I interact with people and this whole people performance potential. It's like helping people and helping organizations figure out what they're good at, what's getting in their way. And at the end of the
mhm.
day, it's all about the people, right?
What
It's
do you
all
mean when you
about,
say that, Fraser? It's all about the people.
I think I use the Jim Collins good to great analogy a lot, as do a
Mhm.
lot of consultants. But I think it
Mm,
really, for me, is if you can help organizations get more of the right people on the bus, right?
mm,
Have them in the right seat and then work with them to kind of unlock their potential. That is just a recipe for success, and it just helps the organization, it helps the people, right? So we can
mhm,
create profitable, healthy, and sustainable organizations, whether
mhm.
you're a startup or you're a large organization
Yeah.
that's been around for a while.
Exactly. So when we're thinking about, so each of us brings a unique perspective into our work and how we do our work and create value for others.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about how people are in the right seat, what puts them in the right seat, how do you figure out what the focus is of their work? Like, what is it about? Here's my question. What is it about that specific piece that lights you up?
Mm. So that activity, Michelle, when we start off with doing when I help small businesses figure out where north is, right?
Mm.
What are they intending to accomplish? And that's kind of the first domino that is tipped over. And
What do you mean when you say that the domino is tipped over?
so I think there's an order of operations to help companies understand what, kind of articulate and help them put a mirror up
Mm.
to them and say, what are you all about? Where are you going? And how intentional about the degree of growth that you are really trying to accomplish. And
Intentional about the
yeah.
degree of growth. That is such a great perspective because not everybody wants the same degree of growth, whether it's, I'm hearing you say it's whether it's speed or scale or scope. The intention around growth is such an important part of this, is what I'm
Mhm.
hearing you communicate.
I strongly believe that, and that's actually a reflection of the owners or the entrepreneur and his or her personality.
Mm,
Some people have a very the personality that they want to grow by 25% per year, right?
right.
They just
Yeah.
see that, they know that, and then they're going to do that. Other
Mm,
people, want to enjoy the tide comes in, all the boats go up kind of mentality. There's nothing wrong with either of them, but if you can figure out who you are And
Mm.
what what is driving you, that's the first part of that. What does the business look like? How are we going to organize the operations of it? And
Right.
then that creates the seats on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can capture that, right, then you can start making really smart people decisions about who is doing what for you.
Yeah, you're really starting then tapping into the people on the bus. You're really starting with the people who's the person who's driving the bus in a sense.
Yeah.
Um, um, when you're talking about the scale or the appetite for growth, if you will, or the personality, I know you've done a ton of work with personalities
Hmm.
and assessments, and that's I know a big part of your passion. What is it about that piece, Fraser, that really stands out for you in terms of the impact that that generates when you have that kind of awareness?
So if there's one thing that gets me, creates the most energy for me in my consultancy,
Mm,
has been the ability to look at somebody kind of under the hood, and this the ability to communicate, this is you, this is your personality, and this is how it impacts you, and this is how other people are impacted, by your actions.
mm-hmm,
And just to see that is me reaction in business leaders, that helps them just understand their style, understand how they can be attractive to people, and how they
mm.
can repel people if they're not careful.
Ah, so what's something that you see commonly when you're doing these personality assessments and giving your leaders and your clients a mirror?
Well, maybe one way of looking at it is, the consequence of having a business leader wanting to hire more of themselves in this new role,
Mm,
as opposed to what's really needed for that role.
hmm.
Some of the most successful people, the drivers, right, the A personality types that we all
Yeah.
see, results, 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 and then people behind that, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of
Hmm.
that first and second priority. And when you can help them understand what is required by your business in the different roles, and how do you figure out, um, the kind of person that should be in your senior leadership team, and your operational management team, and so on and so forth. And I think that's one of the biggest things, that people are so busy, and the business leaders that make it happen, they can make it rain, they can do whatever is
Mm.
needed. That's a gift and a curse, right?
Yeah, I love this. I can hear that you're really tapping it, like you said, people performance potential. That's just such a beautiful um, out map, if you will, of
Hmm.
how to get into the future. What is it, Fraser? How did you come into this? Like, where did your interest in this people dimension of business really start to take place?
Um, I, I was fortunate enough to work with a very, very strong mentor. He was an engineer by education and an entrepreneur by personality. And
Mm,
he started what's now a billion-dollar construction company.
okay.
And he started to show me and tell me tell me about, how businesses are properly organized, in his experience, as a construction organization.
Okay.
And as he painted that picture for me, he started to say, look, here's how this shows up in manufacturing businesses, and here's how the same requirements
Mm,
are in technology and financial services. And he basically said, do you see a pattern here? And it was, organizations that are growing suffer or are impacted by very similar consequences, right? He said, growth is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, what you're doing is working. So, tip of
mhm,
the cap for that. On the other hand, cracks become chasms.
mm,
And if we don't address what's, just a little bit of an annoyance right now, if you double in size, then we have a big problem with people, right? Retaining
mhm,
them, understanding who should be in what seats. And all of a sudden, we've got more of a mess to unwind
mhm.
than if we're intentional and create a plan from the get-go.
So As you were learning this from this mentor, the thing that I'm most curious about is as he was sharing that wisdom with you, and you were hearing about the problems that grow and cracks become chasms and whatnot. I'm imagining that as you're learning this, something is lighting up in you. Like there's some kind of fire in your belly, and I'm imagining that there's an interest or an intrigue or a curiosity or a something. Do you have a sense on that or?
Yeah, that's a good well, you know me pretty well, Michelle. And so I'm kind of built to be a resource for people. That's how I've been my whole life. I'm not the guy
Mm,
running full speed as a child. I'm running with the group and saying, what do we need to do and how do I help you? So when I was equipped in a business sense to have those conversations with people that own and run big organizations, the ability to ask those same questions to organizations that are experiencing growth and to see that same, oh boy, there it is. That's what the problem is for my organization.
yeah.
And have that same meeting with someone else, very successful person, and they're experiencing it too.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I kind of walked around a little taller and was able to step in and help with these big problems that successful people had been kind of having a hard time with. So it ticked a lot of boxes from a personal value standpoint, helping people.
Yeah.
And it has afforded me the ability to, have a consulting practice that I've only clocked in sick a couple of times, I think.
Because you're having so much fun, right?
That's right.
Um, when you said, I am built to be a resource for people,
Mm,
and then you spoke to what that means for you, I heard a couple of things. I heard it gives you an opportunity to solve big problems,
mm.
and it gives you an opportunity to help people. When you are um, learning about a big problem that is particularly exciting for you, what does that big problem feel like, look like? What are the characteristics of it?
Yeah, and I think you've been able to help me do this a lot
Oh,
is
thank
kind
you.
of put the problem, on the table and build some dimensions around it.
Mm,
So, the more what I have jumped into too quickly is, oh, you have a problem, here's what it is. Here's a fix for you.
mhm,
But what I've learned in the last, 10 years, let's say, is to be able to say, well, and to be able to sit in that uncomfortable silence while someone is saying, this is, a $250,000 problem or $1 million problem.
mhm,
And the helper in my personality wants to jump in and give them a hug and say, it's going to be okay. But how we solve these problems is saying, this is
mhm,
what it is, right? Let's create the dimensions of it and then come up with a plan to execute it. And does that sound okay?
mhm,
Right? And
mhm.
here's the price of doing something about it, and here's the price of not doing something about it.
Mm, yeah. So when you're seeing that problem and you're through the thread of this conversation, I'm hearing growth and I'm hearing potential,
Mm,
right? It's accessing something in the future because we want to remove the blocks, which is what you started out talking about, right?
yeah.
Removing all the blocks, getting things out of the way. Um, what is it about that? If you have the kind of impact you want, you talked about $250,000 problem or $1 million problem. What is it, Fraser, on the other side of that problem that is your north? What is
Mm.
it that you're wanting to see as a result of your work?
Yeah, there's some sort of endorphin that is released in my brain when that problem is unlocked or somebody makes
Mm,
this, the best thing is when I help somebody hire for whatever role that is, and I get a phone call after their probation is up and maybe
mm,
after 6 months, and they're so happy and they can see the impact on their business by just one person or something that we've done that allows me. So I don't work there, I'm not an
yeah.
employee, but I get to have a little bit of a
Mm,
positive impact that they're feeling, right?
mhm.
And that also for me is a huge underlying motivator on why I do what I do.
What is it about the people piece that has captured your attention so fervently?
I think in today's world, there's just so much, there's the obvious chaos, and
Mm,
there's always been chaos, right? But now it seems like it's faster and more volatile, and people very often, I think are kind of rudderless sometimes when they're applying for jobs and when
mhm,
they're thinking about themselves and understanding where they're strong and where they naturally just have all the horsepower in the world, and
mhm,
other roles that they've been maybe told that they should, you know apply for or drive towards. There's just going to be
mhm,
so hard.
mhm,
But to be able to give people that insight into themselves, right, and to help that part of I think the people, if you get that right, it's just such a massive part of the puzzle.
yeah, look at your smile. You're right. It's coming through. I can see that. Um, yeah, I'm just finding like everything we're talking about here is we're talking about the construct or the structures in business or the workflows or what have you. There's another element in there. Yes, it's about the people.
Mhm.
Um, for you, what I'm hearing is you want the people to thrive. Right? Is it more about the people or the business? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think it's a different side of the same coin. It's, when, and I see it all the time. Well, not as much as I want, but some people, they're just so invested, like they love showing up to work, and they've been hired to do an admin
Yeah.
role or a project manager, or junior to senior, doesn't really matter. But you see that when the tone is set by leadership,
Mm, mm,
by the owner, and that is, a safe, productive, and kind of, yeah, it's just an amazing place to work, that people just give that extra discretionary effort.
mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
not, oh boy, what time is it? Is it time to clock out? It's like, how do I, from my position in the business, how do I impact it? And maybe it's not even intentional, it's just done, right? It's just
Right.
that's the culmination of having people that are equipped and motivated to do these jobs.
Mm-hmm,
And it's
mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, it's not really work anymore. It's just who they be,
Right.
right? Who they get to be every day.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
aligning, personality with what the job is expected or needs, as kind of a starting point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So you've spent a lot of time professionally investing in learning how to help people find that great spot for them on the bus, if you will, right?
Yeah.
What you've done a ton of education, I know, and you've got a lot of certifications, whether it's a certified professional coach or some
Mm.
behavior assessments or personality assessments. You've done a lot of work in this kind of area. Um, through that learning, what through your learning journey, I'm curious, what has been your greatest learning through that learning journey about people?
Mm. So I'd have to, it's the guy in the mirror first.
Um,
I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is to understand where you're strong and what
um,
drives you, and to accept the fact that, you might not be the highest income earner, you might not be this, you might not be that, but here's what you are, and being
mm,
comfortable in your skin, right? And to be, I'm always working at that, and that's, it's simple, but it's not easy, as the saying
yeah,
goes, right?
yeah.
But to be able to talk to people that you don't know, that are curious about, what do I do next? Where am I going to
Hmm.
be a really good fit? To have that conversation with them and to see that start to kind of resonate in a way is pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned being comfortable in your own skin. It starts with the mirror first, as you said,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Was there a time, Fraser, when you were not comfortable in your own skin?
Yeah, well, that's a deep question, Michelle.
Only if
So
you're willing to share.
no, no, no. I think I played basketball, competitive basketball, into university, and I never owned how I fit into the ecosystem.
What do you
Um,
mean when you say that you didn't own how you fit into the ecosystem?
but, you have expectations of being one of the better players, in
Mm,
your neighborhood, in your district, in your town, right?
hmm
And then, when you when things work out for you or when things don't work out for you, are you valuing yourself as others see you, or are you valuing yourself as you see you,
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
That's from what I learned in my coaching training, big time. It's
Uh-huh.
how to differentiate the what they call the gremlin. There was the guy on your right shoulder
Mm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
devil on your right and the angel on your left, or whatever. Is what are you listening to, right? And what are you hearing? And then, getting into the workforce after university, it was how much money do you make? What's your career path track and this and that? And it's just like that didn't fit, right? And I was probably hard on myself for that kind of.
What was that you're speaking to that didn't fit when you said that didn't fit?
I think it was part of your part of seeing your friends start to branch out and instantly have impact,
Mm.
or have a more defined career path, right,
Oh.
where they could see, if I do this is the consequence, both good and bad, of that.
Mm-hmm.
People getting into roles where they were making insane amounts of money, and I look at that, and I would never be happy doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
um and yet, so it's this thing about what do you value. I think what I learned probably in my late 20s more,
Mm-hmm.
before I became a dad. And then that, once again, as a parent, as you know,
That's not
that
true. Yeah.
that blows things up, a completely different way.
What's the expression? They always say, not parents don't make children, children make parents, or children make adults, adults don't make children, children make adults. That's the expression. Such a great expression.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, do they ever bring you opportunities for learning, as I like to say. It's like, oh, I didn't see that part of me before. That's beautiful. So, this idea of valuing how others see you versus valuing how you see you
Mm,
in your work. I mean, I can only imagine that you come across this all the time, given the type of work that you do in personality assessments and helping people find a match in their employment, right? When, what do you see as the biggest obstacle around helping people see themselves and their truth as opposed to seeing what others see?
yeah, I think it might be a kind of a two-part thing. I think our society is driven to see the entrepreneur, to see the successful person, and they kind of put
Mm,
them up on a pedestal. It's like we all need to be assertive. We all need to be super extroverted. We all need to be incredibly fast-paced, and
right.
just need to be driven to accomplish all this stuff. And what happens if you're not that? If your wiring is not that way, right? If you're more of a supportive person or a technical expert, right? All of a sudden we can get pretty hard on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
of seeing what we're not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into the workplace, and we've been taught this concept of mailroom to the boardroom, that's your path,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, wouldn't it be cool if we could find what you're the best person around at doing, and just
Mm-hmm.
let you do that every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And challenge you and differentiate you in different ways, but it's not necessarily going up in the
Yeah.
org structure on the corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm.
It
The
could be,
different.
just being this master, the Yoda kind of person, right? And doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm. That makes them happy.
Yeah, and let's get them to do more of that. And you know,
Yeah. So 100%. So aligning, really being aware of how you're being influenced in your own identity by what cultural ideas are coming at you.
yeah,
I see this, as you know, in my differentiation work with entrepreneurs. I see this a lot where clients are attached to a certain image, or they have stories about their weaknesses and or their strengths, and they're over, or they're emphasizing weaknesses and undervaluing strengths, and they have
yeah,
resistance about bringing themselves forward. There's a lot of um, hesitation or fear because that's not the identity that others see.
Yeah.
So it can be difficult, when we're trying to forge our own path forward, we're essentially separating from the pack in a way, right?
Yeah.
We're separating, and that can be really, really scary for people. So when you're going through this work and helping people transition
Mm.
into their true self, how does that present for you in your work?
So what you're talking about and explaining there is probably kind of the slowest pace work that this kind of like the evolution of somebody doesn't just say, I'm going to turn off Instagram because all I see is young people driving super nice cars and I'm a young person and I don't have one of those.
Right.
Right. There's this
Mm-hmm.
whole recalibration of like what are the values? And you can do this with a person and a business. It's like what is important to you? What are your values? And values I think are sometimes overused, but what are you all about?
Yeah.
Right? What do you want to be all about? What are you kind of claiming? What are you,
Well, I
you know,
think, you made a really good point. Values is sometimes overused or um, ironically undervalued.
yeah, yeah.
I often see that, and I'm sure you do as well. And one of the things I think that's a big part of the journey, and you alluded to this earlier, is if we allow for our values to be true and really honor them, the next job that we have is to turn those values into value, creating value from those values and seeing how those values allow us to contribute in meaningful ways that's important to us and
Yeah.
brings value to others. As you're going through personality assessments and as you're hiring and recruiting and coaching leaders, what sort of can you think of a time or a story where something like that has happened, where someone has either been unwilling or unable to acknowledge their values and convert them into value?
Mm, that's a good question, Michelle. I'll give you my all-time favorite coaching success story.
Wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you.
Um, so this is an electrical contractor that at the time was, they were growing and they were pretty big and they had a branch manager in the interior.
Hmm.
And he was the best project manager they've ever had up there. And they then put him into a people management role. And
Mm,
things started to kind of go offline for this guy
right. Yeah.
to the point where the business owners were saying, I don't know if this is a good fit
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm.
So, and I was lucky enough to be called in to say, okay, can you have a conversation and try to unlock his understanding of his own value and to make that more attractive to other people that he's going to be managing. And he did. He we assessed him and I kind of put a mirror up and say, this is how you impact people. And he said, okay, I didn't realize that was so off-putting to people, being so results first and relationship second.
Hmm.
He didn't understand that.
Hmm.
He did a huge deep dive. He read a lot. He really took my feedback to heart
Hmm.
and instantly, because he was so driven, started to make those changes. And soon the problems at the branch level were gone. Now he was being in the mix for a regional leadership position. And now he's the CEO,
Gorgeous.
right? It's not me. It's the power that you can put that mirror up to someone and say, here's you, Michelle.
Hmm.
Here's the good news, and here's where we're going
Hmm.
to have to do some work.
Hmm. Hmm. What I
And
heard there too was, not only did he have the ability to access that information, I also heard that he wanted something more for himself. So in a way, he clearly was willing to do the work required to get him to that new place in his career and access new potential,
yeah,
right?
and I mean, he was a very interesting, very like a really great guy. And now he's done so much heavy lifting to understand how he needs to change when he shows up in front of people, as opposed to just blowing through projects as he's naturally gifted at.
Yeah.
But I think it irritated him a lot that he was having that people were reacting to him in a way that he didn't know the cause or why that was
Right.
happening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love for you to compare and contrast, if you will, that story with a
Yeah.
story where perhaps it was unsuccessful, where someone was unable for whatever reason to make that transition, or when you put the mirror up.
Yeah.
Have you had a time when that's not gone as hoped?
And it's interesting with that as I think about that perspective, it's got a very specific personality type that gets into problems with
Interesting.
small businesses. So imagine someone that starts out in a small business, doesn't matter what they do, and 7 years later, he or she is in a more of a senior role. They know how to do everything in the business, but the business is now at a point where they have to start delegating and specializing in different
Mm-hmm.
activities. You can't do everything
Right.
once you hit a certain. So there is a very fast-paced, hands-on kind of personality that at a certain point does would finds it very difficult to delegate, finds it very difficult to let things go and to take the
Mm-hmm.
time to train other people to
Mm-hmm.
do the work that they're very good at so they
Mm.
can take on more responsibility.
So, Fraser, is that a limitation, or like are they genuinely limited by their personality type, or is that something that still has potential, maybe looks different in their growth?
In both cases that I'm thinking of, it was so the problem was compounded because the business owners couldn't figure out why things started to go awry,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't their performance management was unsuccessful, and actually in one of they didn't even do anything. It was just more like internally they hope this person is going to turn things around, right? Maybe
Okay.
it takes a lunch or a
Yeah.
coffee. Hey, can you stop doing this and start doing that? And they couldn't figure it out.
So, is there a personality type for our listeners? Like, I'm
Yeah,
curious about if someone is listening to this and wondering, is that me or is that my boss?
right.
Or is that somebody, that I know? How would we know to identify that type of personality type?
Well, the gift of this person is that they can juggle, a zillion balls up in the air at once.
High
And so
functioning.
they're so they've got this incredible drive and sense of urgency.
Mm,
They can multitask. They love dealing with like everything all at once.
okay.
Okay, that's part of it.
Yeah.
The second part is their need for follow through, which is attention to detail.
Okay.
So when you combine impatience and micromanagement, like very granular style, you get a person at a certain size of company is perfect because they can do everything, right?
Mm,
But when the business turns a corner, maybe it's
mm-hmm.
10 million in revenue or 30 people, full-time employees, whatever
Okay.
that trigger point is,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to they're having a hard time training other people, letting go of things, and not kind of looking around and seeing what everyone else is doing. If you have that person, you have to kind of course correct and say, we want you just to do three things incredibly well, as opposed to eight things really
Mm-hmm.
well.
So that's how to tap into the potential inside that type of personality. Is that right?
It's if you can let these things go, if you can let these five things go,
Mm,
we can actually let you do more valuable, important, strategic, whatever the words are that you can see,
right.
right? But everyone has this plate, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
capacity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if that starts to spill over, then we have some problems, right?
Fraser, do you think that people's capacity is predefined, or is that something that people can expand?
Yeah, I think you can, through efficiencies, you can probably expand what you can do if you work smarter, not harder kind of thing. I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
But the businesses and the leaders that I really have seen this incredible sustainable growth happen
Mm-hmm.
is when they're building capacity before they need it.
Oh, yeah.
because
Hmm.
typically the gap between the person in the role and the next most competent in growing companies is too big,
Right.
right?
Yeah. The
So if
gap is
something
huge.
happens, the
Hmm.
gap is huge,
Hmm. I've seen
right?
that as well. Yeah, that's true. And that makes that transition to letting go of stuff so much more difficult because
Yeah.
there's a lack of time and skill capacity, right? That
And
doesn't allow for that to happen easily.
yeah.
Is that what you're
And
saying?
yeah, and that kind of personality type is it's so frustrating to teach, to take 4 hours and to teach someone how to do something as opposed to them doing it in 4 minutes. And the
Right.
more of that exists in a business, the more
Mm.
growth doesn't, the people side of it doesn't, it can't, or so I shouldn't say it can't, but it's very difficult and challenging
Hmm.
for that to
Hmm.
happen. And then if someone leaves, whether the person that's not getting the opportunity leaves or the person in the role,
Hmm.
you're, you're in trouble,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
there's a hole, a big
There's a
hole.
big hole. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Is this something that you see often in the work that you do?
That's right now is what I talk to people about all the time is that narrowing that gap and understanding that managers at a certain point, part of their day needs to be training and mentoring and coaching as
Hmm.
opposed to just doing the work. Like that
Right.
job description needs to change to have a people development component, not just a task focused component.
Yeah, so as as um as people, especially for people who start doing by doing the work, right? The doing is this is such an interesting piece around identity because when we're starting to do the work, our identity becomes very closely associated with the doing of the
Yeah,
work and the skills and the mastery and all that stuff that of course it feeds us as well because we feel good at stuff, we feel good doing stuff that we're good at,
that's right.
so it's hard to let go of the things to which our identity is attached. So what I'm hearing through this is that you are actually supporting an identity shift as well, I would imagine. Are you in helping your clients move into new potential?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it too. It's that when you assign personal when your identity is doing, is being the controller in a company. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
And letting go of that, it's, once again, it's people logically, it's not hard to let go of things like that, but it becomes
Yeah.
part of you in a small company. Well, I also do this and I also do that. And so there's scope creep in this person's job, right? And
Yeah.
the
And the sense
more,
of, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
I was just going to say the sense of self and the sense of self-worth as we contribute more and more, we
Yeah,
feel more and more valuable, which of course helps us feel more and more. Um, our identity becomes more and more attached to that because if we let go of those things, then I mean, theoretically, it
yeah.
logically would suggest that we're less valuable. If we're,
Well, and then gets back to our conversation about, the organizational structure, and each job has its own personality.
yeah,
And when you can sit down with somebody to say, look, what is easy for you and what your strengths are aligns with this next job up the ladder or horizontally, doesn't really matter.
yeah,
And you can have that conversation.
mm-hmm,
People get it. It's like, oh, I
mm-hmm,
can be a 9 out of 10 in this job that I've never done before. And you can see it and you're telling me and you're painting this picture.
mm-hmm,
That's pretty motivating,
mm-hmm,
right?
exactly.
But
Yeah,
if you haven't done that kind of work and you can't talk about career path planning and succession, which is a massive issue that business owners always put off to the side, right? If you're not having those conversations way before the event actually happens,
yeah.
it's ripe for issues and problems.
Fraser, where does this happen in succession? I'm following you, but I'd love for you to share a little more about that because it's a big issue these days.
Yeah, and so it gets back, Michelle, I think is I'm the founder. And now what? Right? What am I going to do after? So just the very, and who's the founder going to talk? Who's she going to talk to about this?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
how do you create a plan? Like you're reinventing the wheel. Every business owner is trying to figure out, how do I eventually get out of the business?
Mhm.
What's my exit strategy?
Do you find, because I come up against this periodically,
Yeah.
do you find that when they're trying to figure out how to get out of the business, they're also trying to get out of the business and leave the business so that it is essentially exactly as it is today and just continues on, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people feel less receptive to version two of the business, a different iteration, if you will, by the new, the successor.
Well, that's a great point. And so it's to have that conversation of, there's multiple off ramps for you. There's the
Yeah.
one that just leave tomorrow. There's the one that you can stay on in a different role, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
steward, founder, I just want to
Mm-hmm.
be around.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can design that, right? And it's that in coaching, it's like designing the alliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
The founder, she gets to figure out what she wants to do, but it's up to somebody to kind of have the whiteboard and say, here's option 1 and 50, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, and just give them time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's not a, I want to leave next year. How do I do that?
Right.
It's a long
It's a
process, right?
journey.
It is a
Yeah.
real journey. Yeah.
I'm so appreciating this conversation because we're going from, we started with having a certain identity or a story around ourselves. And that was based on how other people saw us that we accept,
Yeah.
right? We accept the story that other people tell us who we are. And then we challenge that and we kind of go, okay, this is who I am. And then through our career, we put up the mirror and we're like, oh, I didn't know I was like that. I've got some
Yeah.
work to do. So there's another identity shift, if you
Yeah.
will. And then as we move into our career, towards the end of our career, we're going through yet another identity shift. And this happens multiple times through one's career path or even through one's life that we've alluded to.
Yeah.
The thread in all of this feels to me like having a really strong handle on the what we are identifying with and whether that's consistent with who we want to be today and who we want to become and be in the future.
Yeah.
Is that capturing what you're saying?
I I love that. I think as you come out of high school, and you're, for me, single guy. Then I took on this new role of husband, followed by father,
Mm-hmm.
right? Followed by son taking care of ailing parents, followed by, I want to retire someday. So there's all these new
Mm-hmm.
identities that fit into who you are, right?
Yeah.
So we're always kind of layering on top. Maybe one comes out and one's added and things like that. And at the end of the day, there's this self-reflection and creating time to even be able to, don't go too deep. You don't have to go, but it's just to have that conversation
Mm-hmm.
internally, or with a
Mm-hmm.
trusted advisor or a friend, is saying, look, here's my core, and here's where I'm at, right? And
And
that's
I
what.
think, you just thank you for that anchoring
Yeah.
us. Here's the core, the anchor, right? And the
Yeah.
core is the values that we talked about being undervalued.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Those values are at the heart of everything. And I think if we can, if we go through all these identity shifts or identity challenges or sort of questioning, oh my gosh, who am I? Am I valuable? Am I being in integrity? Am I consistent? Am I who I want to be?
Yeah.
Just having those values as a touch point through the course of our journey, right? As we're
Yeah.
moving through our journey, I think it provides for some really, like I like to say, put your feet firmly on the ground and it says, okay,
Yeah.
this is what's important to me. These are my values. And from here, if these are my values,
Yeah.
now what?
Right.
Right? Now where do I
Exactly.
go? So beautiful. Fraser, if thinking back on the trajectory, which you just started a few minutes ago, thinking back
Yeah.
on your trajectory,
Yeah.
if you were to advise your younger self, or perhaps someone starting their career or young in their career today, what might you offer them in terms of wisdom?
Um, take a step out onto the skinny part of the branch further than you think you can. Because most of the time, the branch is strong enough to hold you up. And if you do
Yeah.
take a tumble, you're going to climb right back up. You know, being a son of a baseball player, it's a game of failure.
Mm,
Baseball's a cruel game. It's a game of it doesn't work out
hmm.
most of the time, but it's
Right.
how you react to the failure which makes you
Mm,
successful,
hmm.
right? It's what you learn on the way up
Yeah.
and maybe on the
On
way
the way
down too,
down.
right?
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. Like I love the metaphor of climbing. I can see, inching out on the branch, seeing and seeing,
Yeah.
how far can I go? And oops, down I go. And
And
then
now you
climbing
know.
back up again. And that's the key.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Such a beautiful, kids do this all day long, but as adults, I think we don't. We don't climb out to the edge of that branch and figure out where the crack is going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't sort of inch out towards the edge of our greater possibility
Yeah.
for fear of falling, and the reminder that we can climb up again and find a new branch and do it
Exactly.
again.
Exactly.
That's gorgeous. Fraser, for those who are interested in finding out more about you and the work that you do in supporting people, performance, and potential, where might they find you?
I would just look me up on LinkedIn. I think, Fraser Engel on LinkedIn, and I'm connected to lots of people. And my thing, if you're a business owner or just someone who's curious about this kind of work, love to chat, love to
Mm,
brainstorm and talk to you about, whatever's going on.
exactly. A
Yeah.
joy to work with humor and wit. Skilled facilitator bringing that forward. So, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us on the
Thanks,
podcast.
Michelle.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Okay, bye for now.